Chartering with friends or family is a great way to bring down costs. But will money end up in the way of having a good time? Hi, I'm Carolyn Sherlock, and on this episode of the Boat Galley Podcast, I share an easy way to deal with those little expenses that come up without causing resentment. Today's episode of the Boat Galley Podcast is sponsored by Pantry in Paradise. As cruisers, we've all experienced LOB, or lost on board. You know you have something, like a can of mushroom soup, but you just can't find it. Enter Pantry in Paradise, your go-to app for galley management. Pantry in Paradise tracks your provisions, where they're stored, and creates your next shopping list. Provision for guests or even extra weeks. Find Pantry in Paradise in the App Store and on Google Play. More and more often, groups of friends or family are going in together on a bareboat charter. It's a great way to bring down the cost per person and to share both the work and the fun. While I don't want to get into all the logistics of chartering with a group, I do want to pass on one tip that a friend gave us before our first charter with another couple. No matter how well you know the people you're chartering with, money is always a touchy subject. Now, usually the charter company will accept separate payments and each person, couple, or family can make their own travel arrangements. It's even pretty easy to divide up a provisioning bill or get separate checks for dinner at a beach restaurant. Where it gets tough, though, is all the little day-to-day expenses that are incurred by a boat as a whole, such as mooring or anchoring fees, a cruising guide if it's not included in the charter, a cruising permit, maybe a taxi to and from the airport or parking. How about ice, fuel or water costs, group activities where it's priced as a group, such as a taxi to a restaurant or a beach, a guide for a shore excursion, the group price for a snorkel trip, and then some extra provisions that you may purchase along the way. You don't want to have to get extra money from each person or couple every time one of these expenses comes up. It's also a recipe for disaster to say, "Oh, we'll get it this time, you get it the next time," as inevitably someone feels that they've paid more than their share. Yeah, you could all write down what you paid for and then square up at the end of the trip, but some things will be forgotten. A simpler solution is to have a kitty for those group expenses. What we did was to come up with an estimate of what the total for these would be, added some extra for good measure, and then rounded up to a number that was nicely divisible by the number of people. If my memory serves correctly, I think it was about $100 a person, but that was over 15 years ago. We put the money into a Ziploc that we put in a somewhat hidden place. Whenever it was time to pay one of the group expenses, we simply went and took the money from the bag and returned the change there. We didn't bother to keep receipts with only 2 couples on board. We trusted everyone. If you think there could be controversy about what's paid from the kitty, it would be a good idea to keep track of the expenses on a sheet of paper stuck in the bag. Towards the end of the week, we discovered that our kitty needed some more money. We'd underestimated taxi rides and shore excursions, and everybody threw in another $20. At the end of the trip, there were just a few dollars left in the kitty. Instead of trying to divide it up, we gave it to the person whose car we'd all ridden in to the airport. Have you enjoyed this episode of the Boat Galley Podcast? If so, please give us a great review and tell your friends. Oh, and be sure to subscribe if you haven't.